Led by Lord Foster of Bath, reformists in the House of Lords have demanded that the UK government explain why the Gambling Review's white paper is scant on advertising policies and reforms. The scarcity of advertising policies saw Foster state that the white paper had failed to achieve one of its primary objectives, that being rectifying the conditions of the 2005 Gambling Act, which liberalised gambling advertising across the UK media. DCMS responded that it stands by cap codes as the best mechanism to moderate gambling advertising in a fair and proportionate manner, as the white paper is focused on minimising risks of excessive advertising. I'm Martyn Elliott, and in today's iGaming Daily, we'll analyse the latest round of debates on the future of gambling advertising in the UK. And I'm delighted to be joined today by the Bruno Fernandes and Bruno Guimaraes of the iGaming business podcasting world. We're back to the old two Teds thing, that being Ted, SBC's content director, and Ted, editor of Payment Expert and Insider Sport. So, Ted Menmuir, how are you today?
Good. But I'd like to be referenced as Bruno. That'd be a good name change.
Yeah, more than willing to refer to you as Bruno. Do you prefer Fernandes or the very cool Bruno Guimaraes, obviously?
I'd probably go Fernandes. Yeah, I don't know why, but yeah, I'd go Bruno Fernandes. Yeah.
Wow, that's a disappointing answer. So, Ted, here with me in Manchester. That makes you Bruno, the Bruno Guimaraes of this podcast.
Why not?
Your haircut is not looking quite as stupid as his. I don't know if you saw it the weekend. It's he's still a genius, but yeah, he needs to sort that blonde do out, I think. But anyway, before we get on to today's subject, it would be remiss of me not to mention that iGaming Daily is brought to you in partnership with Optimove, the number one CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. And as a special offer, Optimove is offering new clients a free first month when they buy Optimove. For more information and to claim that free month, go to optimove.com/SBC. And we'll leave a link in the podcast episode description, so you can click through from there. So let's get into it. If we go to you, Ted, down in London first, could you give us a bit of an overview of this short debate they had in the House of Lords last week, and what exactly Lord Foster had to say?
For those of you who tuned in last week, there was a short debate in the House of Lords, which followed morning proceedings on the government's review or ongoing review of public transport costs. And following a hard morning of debate, Lord Foster stood up, took the floor, and lambasted the Gambling Review's white paper, stating that it had scant recommendations and policies on reforming gambling advertising. He stated that apart from the focus to reduce risk elements of gambling advertising, such as free spins and bonuses, and the pending voluntary Premier League clubs' voluntary ban on frontal shirt sponsorships, the white paper offered no substantive reforms on gambling advertising. And Foster has called on DCMS to explain why this is the case, and why it has rejected what it believes are kind of many recommendations and research on toughening up advertising rules for gambling and to minimise harm and the exposure of risks to the general public. So it's very much a call to why reformists believe that gambling advertising policies have been set aside in the Gambling Review.
Let's explain who Lord Foster is really for our listeners in other countries. He's a peer who represents the third party, the Liberal Democrats in the UK. He's in our somewhat archaic, unelected upper house. So with all that in mind, Ted, does this debate in the Lords really matter? Does the agenda and the recommendations of the white paper have they not been settled for a while?
Yeah, obviously the white paper's recommendations were first outlined in April last year, so it seems that maybe Lord Foster has been a little bit late in making these comments. However, I guess from his side of things, it's nothing new because, as we know, he's been quite a long-term advocate for gambling reform, has spoken on quite a range of issues, as Ted outlined to us earlier, with marketing and advertising being perhaps one of the biggest, most sort of hotly and fiercely debated topics relating to this whole regulatory process. I think, maybe it would be of more significance if it was a directly elected member of Parliament, one of the MPs in the House of Commons, who obviously represent a constituency where they'll have had people's opinions that they might have gathered in sort of like constituency workshops and stuff, or polls or anything like that, or raised at party meetings. But also, I guess something to really consider is the fact that even though the white paper recommendations came out a year ago, the Gambling Commission and the CMS have been engaged in consultations on them about how to implement them, and even though they've been adamant that this is final, these are the final recommendations, there could still be room in there for people to have some influence on how some of these regulatory recommendations are sort of crafted and implemented and adopted. And also, I'd also probably argue that any comments, any public comments made by a legislator or policymaker are still important to factor in, because it kind of indicates that there is a continuing sentiment around this. And one of the kind of absence of gambling advertising regulations in the white paper was cited at the time as being a cause for concern for reformists, a lot of whom were very, very in favour of having some stricter requirements. I know Ted talked earlier about the front of shirt sponsorship withdrawal that the Premier League's engaging with. Obviously, I mean, I think various reform advocates were welcoming of that, but a lot of them also felt it could have gone a lot further. Like some of the most vocal proponents were calling for just sort of a complete severing of ties when it comes to marketing and advertising between sports organisations, not just in football as well, across various sports like rugby and so on, between these sports organisations and the betting industry, because a lot of people have been citing concerns about the visibility of gambling in sports, particularly ones that are followed by younger people. So I think Lord Foster's comments show that this sentiment is still alive and well, and that the white paper hasn't ended that debate.
Okay, that's interesting. Are we just risking here rerunning the debate we've had several times over the last couple of years, do you think, Ted?
Okay, no, it's a good point. I don't agree that gambling advertising has been sidelined, as the reformists say. As mentioned by DCMS's response, it believes that gambling advertising is intertwined with the overall package to reform the gambling sector and to improve standards. Where I think kind of the reformists are now prioritising, or where they're looking to implement the focus, is, as Lord Foster stated, is that he feels that the DCMS and UK Gambling Commission, they're going to be in for a shock come July, when the new problem gambling stats are published, right? Or the new way of reporting problem gambling statistics are published for the UK market. And if the prediction is that 1.5 million adults are at risk of gambling harms, the reformists believe that the subject matter of gambling exposure should once again be resurfaced and has to be re-engaged with. They know that this is a subject or matter that's gonna hit the headlines.
I don't think it has been sidelined, but actually what the debate in the build-up to the publication of the white paper did was change the habits or change the practices of gambling operators in the UK. And there's been a bigger focus on responsible gambling messaging and advertising, and dedicating a certain percentage of advertising campaigns to that. On the subject of really the idea that there is far too much gambling advertising and that people are upset about it, which is one of the things Lord Foster said, in short, he thought that the public opinion would like to see less gambling advertising or more restrictions on gambling advertising. Do you think that is true, Ted? Do you think there really is a public outcry?
I feel like maybe public outcry would be a bit too strong of a word. I don't think, we're not seeing. It's not like we're seeing people demonstrating in the streets, or massive petitions going around. But there's definitely an undercurrent. I think if I just focus on sports, there's definitely some sections of fan bases that are a bit tired of betting advertising. Maybe not necessarily betting advertising in general, but perhaps just sort of the visibility of it on front of shirt in particular. We've seen, I think we've seen Aston Villa fans and Everton fans in the past have spoken out against some deals that those clubs have signed. And I think what Villa's was beat with BK8. I think that had a bit of a backlash on mainly around social media. You see things like that, and Everton's with Stake as well had some fan criticism. Although it was hardly like it was. Yeah, it's not like it's not like the whole city of Liverpool went out and demonstrated against Everton's deal with Stake, which I think could be more. Which if that had happened, I think that'd be more fitting of the term public outcry. So I think Lord Foster he's right in that there's always going to be some people who are criticising it, who have a negative opinion of it, but I don't think it's as widespread as he would be suggesting there. I think often what a lot of people are more annoyed with is it's a lot of the deals we've seen, like with Manchester City signed one, didn't they, that was quite controversial, with a lot of these more obscure companies that people don't know a lot about. It's these sort of deals that people are more annoyed about, not let's say ones like West Ham and Betway, which is more of quite a widely known operator. It's very transparent that it's licensed with the UKGC, that it has a good record on sort of responsibility and responsible marketing and so on. I think it really depends on the type of deal rather than just betting advertising in general. I mean, I'm not sure if Ted has got anything he wants to add on to that.
I think in the public debate, you've got to kind of divide or separate exposure from saturation. So the criticism there for the Premier League was that there was just too many shirt sponsorships going on, and that's now going to be put up for debate with the voluntary shirt sponsorship ban. We've seen this in other kind of advertising channels, especially on TV, but actually the spend is now minimising. UK gambling spends about 1.5 billion ad spend per year, but that exposure is now moving from TV sets to online. However, even in the marketing agenda for across UK mediums, is that the online channel is being exploited not just by gambling but by other sectors. Crypto, consumer loans financing, cheap borrowing, so other high-risk sectors. And this is another debate that needs to be kind of thought about separately, but that gambling's involved in. And again, this is where you have to kind of trust the cap codes to implement safeguards for the public, not just for gaming.
And Ted, you've already mentioned the cap codes there, and DCMS, as it sort of stands by those codes as the best mechanism to regulate gambling advertising. Do you think that's right?
Okay, so here I'm going to reference Lord Parkinson of Whitley-Pay's reply, who represented DCMS, and he stated that gambling regulations since 2005, the year which liberalised gambling advertising in UK media, have not been static. We've seen kind of year-on-year change to how the codes are applied and how the codes are reformed with UK gambling advertising. The other thing that was pointed out was that GASA and CAP are reactive regulators to market standards and market infringements. So they do penalise, as you see on a month-on-month basis, gambling adverts that do not uphold ASA standards. Any journalist will tell you about that. And the other thing is that it has upheld, CAP has upheld its codes monitoring and regulating gambling since 2005. The other thing here is that, again, as you mentioned in your introduction, it's that it wants a balanced and proportionate way to regulate gambling advertising in the UK. And that kind of the trigger factors, it hasn't seen kind of any big trigger. So although it's seen an increase in advertising, there's been kind of no significant increase in the participation rates at a population, or at the participation rates of gambling or problem gambling rates at a population level across the UK. So it has nothing in its remit to kind of implement tougher directives on gambling advertising as stands.
Let's draw this thing to an end now with a final question. Where do we stand with gambling advertising with regards to the white paper consultations? Are you expecting to see any big changes, Ted?
I would say no, at least for now, purely because obviously CMS and the UKGC, well, particularly CMS, I guess is the main one, as I said before, I'm very adamant that the white paper recommendations are final and the consultations are all about implementing these. So as far as the white paper is concerned, I think it's gambling, advertising and marketing sort of caveats there, what we can expect to see. However, as I noted earlier, with like Lord Foster's comments show, there's still quite a strong sentiment around it. There's still a lot of very strongly held opinions around it. So I think this is just going to be a debate that's going to carry on, and we could potentially see maybe some different changes further down the line. I guess the other thing that's important to note, though, is the fact that I know I've mentioned this on too many podcasts now, I feel like a broken record, but this year is going to be an election year, and we don't really know what impact that could have. Could that offset the consultations and the implementations of the review's recommendations even further and kick it even further down the line, which I guess could then leave it more open to potential changes.
Yeah, I think the reformists that Lord kind of give away their strategy, and they're going to target putting the subject matter of gambling advertising back in the headlines come July with the report new stats on problem gambling from the UK. It's the most conflicting topic of the gambling review, and I think it's the one where kind of no party wants to give way. In terms of the reformists, I think that they view gambling advertising or restricting gambling advertising as the most visible effect of having imposed reforms on a high-risk industry, i.e. banning shirt sponsorships, banning advertising on TV, as we've seen in other European markets. This is going away nowhere.
Okay, interesting to see, and also interesting that our government hasn't just taken the view that we want to be seen to be acting tough. Banning advertising is the most visible form of acting tough. So let's see how long that holds for. But Ted, thank you both for joining me today. And thanks to you out there for listening. And we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of iGaming Daily.